On the night of October 15th and 16th, 2016, 35-year-old architect Antoine Duval and his 32-year-old wife, designer Isabel, left New Orleans for their annual trip to the Atchafalaya swamps. It was supposed to be a short trip, 2 days of fishing and a traditional dinner right by the water. The next morning, they were to return home. 7 years had passed, and as the workers were clearing a blockage in a canal near Baton Rouge, one of them caught a metal hook. The gray body of a car slowly emerged from under a layer of silt. All the doors were locked and the keys were in the ignition. But the main question remained unanswered. Where were the Duval couple, and why was their car in the depths of the swamp? Friday, October 15th, 2016. New Orleans woke up to warm, heavy air. On Pelican Street, a neighbor, Mrs. LeBlanc, would recall seeing Antoine and Isabel Duval outside her house around 8 o'clock in the morning. They were carrying bags, a thermos, and a folded boat. She was holding a newspaper with a weather forecast and a rain warning. According to her, Antoine just smiled. "What's a little water going to do us?" And Isabel, laughing, replied that they would bring her fish. This brief exchange would later become the first entry in the police report. The Duvali had a well-established tradition of going to the Atchafalaya Basin every year on their wedding anniversary. There, among the cypress trees and flooded meadows, they would fish and stay overnight in a tent. Relatives would confirm that both knew the area well, had experience, and never took any risks. Their trip this time was to be no exception: a short drive, 2 hours of travel, a night by the water, and a return the next day. At 9 in the morning, the couple was seen in a coffee shop on the corner. The barista remembered their order: 2 black coffees. No sugar and no rush. Antoine paid in cash. Then they took the highway west toward Baton Rouge. 2 hours after leaving, they stopped at a small gas station. A cashier named Chantel, whom investigators showed the photos to, recognized the couple. She said the man bought coffee, sandwiches, a pack of cigarettes, and a new paper map of Louisiana. "They seemed happy," she said, "a young couple on vacation." There was no video footage of the stop, as the surveillance system had not been working for a long time. The receipt in the cash register preserved the approximate time, between 11 and 12 in the afternoon. After that, the Duval's trail dissolved. The weather began to change. The National Service reported that rainstorms were approaching. The asphalt road turns into a dirt road and then extends to the Atchafalaya swamp. On the map, this section is marked as a temporary easement road, which often floods after rains. This is where the gray Honda CR-V turned, according to an eyewitness. Vernon Clare, a local hunter, told investigators that, around 5 p.m., he saw a car with a boat on the roof slowly turn right near an old bridge over the canal. The car disappeared behind the trees, the headlights flashed briefly on the wet track, and that was it. Clare says he waved, but the driver didn't respond. "It was already raining," he recalled. "Maybe they didn't notice me." A woman from the nearest house confirmed that after 5, she heard the engine noise and the distant clanging of metal, as if something heavy was driving over uneven ground. Then everything stopped. The sound sank into the silence that descends on the marshes at dusk. After that time, no witnesses saw Antoine and Isabel again. Their phone did not work, and no traffic cameras recorded the car's movement any further. The police report states, "The possible route ends a mile from the bridge where the asphalt turns to dirt." That evening, rain pounded Atchafalaya with a steady noise. The road was drowning in water, and the branches of the cypress trees bent so low that headlights were lost between the trunks. People who live in the area say that after 5 o'clock it is dark, even if the sky is still bright. That is where the gray car of the Duval couple turned off, and no one saw it again. Where they stopped and what happened next is unknown. Only short lines will remain in the documents. Last contact, gas station. Last witness, a hunter near the bridge, direction deeper into the swamp. This is the end of the official picture of the day. Sunday, October 16th, 2016. In the afternoon, the sky over New Orleans became overcast with low clouds, and the rain returned to the city. It was the evening Antoine and Isabelle Duvalier were to return from a trip to Atchafalaya. They planned to arrive home by evening, but their home on Pelican Street remained quiet and dark. The couple's phones were not answering. Isabelle's sister, Madeleine Renaud, admits that she was not worried at first. In her first testimony, she said, "We thought that they must be somewhere in the middle of nowhere where there is simply no connection." But as the night went on, no messages came through. As the clock approached midnight, Madeleine started calling friends, checking hospitals, contacting friends of the couple. No one had heard anything. Monday, October 17th. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the office of the architectural firm Duval & Partners opened its doors, but Antoine did not show up. His colleagues say that in 15 years of work, he has never been late without warning. By 9 o'clock, his phone was still out of range. The company's director tried to contact his wife, but no luck. That's when the first official missing persons report was filed with the New Orleans police. The officer on duty, as in many similar cases, responded in the standard way. The adults may have been delayed in their travels. The report states, "It is recommended to wait 48 hours." But the family did not wait. A few hours later, Madeleine came to the police station in person with a printout of the route her sister had sent her the day before. This was the reason for the early start of the search. The first police actions were focused on the highway between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. At 9 a.m., patrol officers stopped at several gas stations, including the one where the cashier, Chantel, said the Duvals were last seen. She recognized them from their photos and confirmed their purchases: coffee, sandwiches, a map. But from that moment on, there was no trace of them. Detective Luc Thibault, an experienced local police officer with more than 20 years of experience in the Atchafalaya Basin, was brought in to investigate. He was the first to call the situation suspicious from the get-go. Thibault arrived on the scene that afternoon at noon. They started with the most obvious, the road where the gray Honda CR-V was last seen. Search teams headed toward an old bridge leading into the swamps. It was raining incessantly, and the ground was being washed away. One of the volunteers would later say that the wheels were quickly sinking in the clay, as if the earth itself did not want to give up its secrets. During the day, they combed the sides of the main highway and all side roads within 20 miles. Not a single trace of a car, no wreckage, no tire tracks. Thibault then turned to the Air Force, and on Tuesday morning, a helicopter appeared over the marshes. The pilot reported that due to thick cloud cover and heavy rain, visibility was almost impossible. Atchafalaya looked like a solid sea of water. The search was complicated by the lack of a starting point. The car was not found, which means the dogs had nothing to sniff out. The dog handlers confirmed that in such conditions, when it rains for days on end, any scent disappears in a matter of hours. Detective Thibault decided to act through people. Together with the local sheriff, he visited the small settlements scattered around Atchafalaya. Villagers and fishermen gave vague accounts. "Maybe I saw a car that looked like theirs." Yes, it was raining, something was driving by. Headlights between the trees. It all boiled down to speculation. In parallel, the police checked all the hospitals and traffic incidents in the area. Not a single incident was found that could be linked to the missing people. Their bank cards remained inactive. The phones last recorded a signal near Baton Rouge on Saturday afternoon. On Tuesday evening, the search operation was officially expanded. Boats were brought in to search the canals and bayous. Local volunteers, including hunters and fishermen, went out on the water with spotlights, combing the shores. But all they saw was endless trees, water, and fog. Thibault's report of October 17th states, "The terrain is difficult, the swamps are flooded, and visibility is limited. The absence of a vehicle is surprising. A vehicle the size of an SUV could not have simply disappeared." Rumors began to spread among the residents of the area. Some said they had seen tire prints in the swamps. Others said they had heard an engine that suddenly stopped at night. The police checked each report, but nothing was confirmed. On Wednesday, the rain did not stop. The water level in the canals rose so high that some roads became impassable. The official operation had been going on for 3 days without any results. Detective Thibault, according to his colleagues, spent hours poring over maps of the basin, trying to determine where Duvalier might have turned. In his evening report, he made a brief but revealing entry. 2 adults and a car in the middle of the swamps. No signal, no witnesses. How do you search for someone you're not even sure where you saw them last? In those days, Atchafalaya looked like an endless swamp under a gray curtain of rain. There was water everywhere, on the roads, in the yards, even in the cemeteries. Every sound was muffled in this endless silence. For Thibault, this was the beginning of a case that would haunt him and those waiting for an answer for a long time. The Duval's car was never found. And as the heavy rain continued to pound the cypress leaves, even the experienced rescuers were beginning to give up. Atchafalaya had taken 2 people and was not going to return them. Several months passed after the disappearance of Antoine and Isabelle Duval. Autumn gave way to winter, the rains receded, and Atchafalaya became calm and silent again. But for the Duval family, this calm was deceptive. None of the search operations yielded any results. By December, the official search was suspended. A short note appeared in police reports. Active actions completed. No investigative results were found. The case was transferred to the Missing Persons Department. Detective Luc Thibault returned to the swamps for several more weeks, at his own expense, without orders, just to make sure he hadn't missed something obvious. His colleagues recall that he collected the wreckage of old boats, empty canisters, and looked for even the slightest sign of a car or camp. But Atchafalaya left nothing behind, no belongings, no traces, no answers. In the spring of the following year, the case was officially transferred to the archive. For the police, it became another unsolved story. 2 adults who went to the countryside and disappeared. No witnesses, no body, no car. For statistics, it was another item in a long list of Louisiana swamp mysteries. But for the family, it was not a statistic. Isabelle's sister, Madeleine Renaud, was the one who kept the case alive. Every October, she would ask the police to resume the search, but every time she heard the same thing. There is no new evidence. Newspaper archives contain dozens of articles about her attempts to reach out to the public. Short notes in the missing sections, photographs with the inscription, 7 years of silence. The journalist noted that Madeleine continued to organize annual reunions near Moreau Pass Lake, where the Duval's car was last seen. Every year she put up new flyers, updated phone numbers, but no one called. Eventually, she quit her job and devoted herself to the search full-time. Locals said that she became a part of the history that cannot be forgotten, but no one wants to remember. For most New Orleanians, the Duval story gradually turned into an urban legend. Older people said that the swamps do not let go of those who go too far, and that the water remembers. Young people joked about the road that disappears after the rain. But even those who did not believe in the mystical recognized it. Atchafalaya has its own character and does not tolerate outsiders. Luc Thibault, meanwhile, had retired. He was in his 50s, and after dozens of cases, most of which ended in tragedy, he was simply tired. His job description said that he was conscientious, but prone to obsessive review of old cases. Thibault did indeed often return to the archive, where the Duval's case was among the hundreds of folders. He would reread protocols, search reports, and witness statements. The feeling of uncertainty did not leave him even after his release. A few years later, journalists from a local newspaper mentioned him in a short interview. The former detective said, "In every case, there is a moment after which everything seems to disappear. In their case, it happened before anyone realized they were missing." His words were not included in the main story. The editors decided that they were too gloomy. On October 12, 2023, the Atchafalaya Basin was in the news again. A hurricane, one of the most powerful in the last decade, passed through Louisiana. The water level in the canals rose to a critical level, and the current demolished bridges, boats, and old barges. Tree fragments, pieces of metal, and even fragments of old cars were washing ashore. News reports showed flooded settlements, twisted electric poles, and washed-out roads. Among these images, Atchafalaya was briefly mentioned. Relief teams are clearing canals, pulling out debris and rubble. For most, it was just another report of a natural disaster. But for a few people, the footage evoked something else, an old, almost forgotten sense of anxiety. Madeleine Renaud saw the story that evening. The photos of her sister and Antoine still hung on the wall in her apartment. She kept the TV on even when the news had long since moved on to another topic. In the days that followed, she began calling local services again, trying to find out if there was anything familiar in the wreckage. Former detective Luc Thibault had also seen the story. He was in his 60s, lived on the outskirts of Baton Rouge, and rarely traveled outside the city. Neighbors recall that he often watched the news without sound, carefully, as if looking for something specific. On the evening of October 15th, he was sitting in front of the TV when the camera showed footage of a canal being cleared. In the water, he could see pieces of metal, tires, and a dirty current pulling something large into the depths. A neighbor who was nearby that evening would later tell reporters, "He stared for a very long time, did not blink. Then he just said, 'Atchafalaya is speaking again,' and turned off the TV." For most people, it was just another post-hurricane report, but for Thibault, it was a return to a history that the swamps had not allowed him to forget. And perhaps it was then that he first saw what would later be called a premonition. October of 2023. The Atchafalaya Basin has not yet recovered from the hurricane that hit a few weeks ago. The water rose many feet, changing the usual channels of the canals and bays. Branches, boat wreckage, and pieces of metal were floating between the trees, creating chaotic jams. For local utilities, these were routine consequences of the elements, but it was amidst this mess that the swamps were about to reveal their ancient secret. On October 22nd, a group of water authority workers were working near Baton Rouge. According to foreman René Marcel, they were clearing a blockage in a narrow canal where hundreds of pieces of debris had been driven by the hurricane. Logs, old furniture, and even roof fragments from surrounding houses were floating on the surface. "We were pulling out everything we could," Marcel recalled, when the hook hit something metal that wouldn't give way. A worker named Ben Howard tried several times to change direction, thinking he had hit a barrel or refrigerator. But the object was sitting deep, as if it had grown to the bottom. When they began to pull it up with a cable, the water rose in bubbles and the silt rose in a heavy, dark wave. Then a deformed, mud-covered shape slowly emerged from the depths. When it was pulled up, everyone realized that it was a car body. At first, no one believed that the car could have been underwater for so long. The body looked almost intact, only darkened, with traces of rust. On the hood, there was a crescent-shaped scratch with old enamel showing through. This detail would later be recalled by Madeleine Renaud, Isabelle Duval's sister. It was the same crack on her missing family's car. The foreman reported the discovery to the St. Martin County Sheriff's Office. Officers and a technical team were dispatched to the scene. After several hours of work, the car was pulled to shore with the help of a lifting cable. The water flowing from the body was thick, almost black in color, and there was a pungent smell of silt and rotten vegetation. The police report stated, "The vehicle is a Honda CR-V, gray in color. There are no license plates. The locks are not damaged. The windows are intact. The doors are closed. The keys were found in the ignition." This detail immediately raised questions. If the car had been flooded, the doors should have been open, otherwise the water pressure would have broken the glass. But there were no broken windows. Everything looked as if the car had been calmly put to the bottom, not thrown, but driven into the water. When the interior was cleared of silt, several things were found inside. On the front seat was an old paper map of Louisiana, torn at the fold, and a plastic water bottle in the cup holder. There were traces of dust on the dashboard, and the seat belts were fastened. But there was nothing personal inside, no backpack, no fishing tackle, not even the first aid kit the family always took with them. A folding boat that was supposed to be attached to the roof was also missing. Even the attachment points looked clean, as if the boat had been removed in advance. When inspecting the hull, the experts noticed a dent on the left side, deep but without penetrating the metal. The technician's report reads, "The impact was formed before the submergence. Possible contact with another vehicle or heavy object." The car was carefully opened. It was dry inside, surprisingly dry, considering 7 years underwater. This meant that the doors had remained sealed the entire time. Local residents who watched the work told reporters that the police were extremely cautious, not allowing anyone to approach, not even the cleanup workers. One of them said, "When they pulled the car out, everyone just fell silent. No one said a word. It felt like the swamp was giving back something it shouldn't have." The next morning, the sheriff's press office issued a brief statement. As part of the post-hurricane cleanup efforts, a vehicle was found that may be tentatively linked to the disappearance of 2 people in 2016. The circumstances are being investigated. Meanwhile, photos from the scene were shared on social media. They showed a gray body, thickly covered with silt, and the shine of a crescent moon on the hood, the same detail that the family of the missing had once mentioned. The journalists quickly obtained archival photos of the Duvals, and the match became obvious. That evening, it was decided to reopen the case of their disappearance. A former detective, Luc Thibault, was invited to investigate. His name still appeared in the initial report, and the department's leadership believed that he would be able to help establish the context. When Thibault arrived at the scene, the car was already parked in a special lot near the sheriff's building. According to eyewitnesses, he stood silently for a long time, looking at the body. Then he ran his hand over the metal and said quietly, "It didn't wash away. He was hidden." For the official record, he later noted, "The condition of the doors, locks, and the position of the key in the ignition indicate that the vehicle was deliberately submerged. Probably the car was driven into the water at low engine speeds, after which the engine was turned off." This conclusion completely changed the perception of the disappearance. If earlier it was an accident, now it became obvious that someone had deliberately driven the car into the water. The logic broke down. The doors were locked, the key was in the ignition, there were no belongings, and the boat was gone. The marshes, which had been silent for years, suddenly spoke not with the voice of the elements, but with the language of facts. And every detail of this car hinted that the Duval story did not end with that journey, but was only waiting for the moment to surface again. The car, recovered from the depths of the Atchafalaya, was officially sent for examination to the laboratory at the St. Martin County Sheriff's Department. When the silt was completely cleared, the technicians got to the identification number on the body. The embossed symbols under the hood were partially preserved, but this was enough to confirm the main thing. The VIN number revealed that the gray Honda CR-V belonged to Antoine Duval, a registered resident of New Orleans. 7 years after the family's disappearance, the fact became official. Their car was found. The report states, The vehicle identification number confirms that it belongs to the Duvals. The license plates were removed before the sinking. This, the absence of license plates, was the first unexpected detail. If the car had been washed away by water, the plates should have remained bolted on, but they were removed manually. Then the work of forensic experts began. Several partial fingerprints were found in the cabin. According to chief expert Brian Lambert, the prints were badly damaged. Water and time had erased most of the details. Those that were identified belonged to Antoine and Isabel Duval. No other prints were found in the databases. But one surface seemed strange to the experts. There were no traces at all on the door handles and steering wheel, as if they had been deliberately erased before the car fell into the water. At the same time, the engine was technically analyzed. The mechanics noted that the engine was not running at the time of the immersion. The spark plugs remained dry, and no traces of water were found in the oil. The transmission was in neutral. This meant that the car was not traveling or falling. It was pushed or started from a gentle slope. In their conclusion, the experts directly stated, the plunge was controlled, presumably carried out by other persons. A thin strip of blue paint was found on the left bumper under a layer of silt. It looked like a scratch, but under a microscope, experts saw 2 layers of varnish, gray on the bottom and blue on top. The paint did not belong to the Duval's car. It was sent for chemical analysis to determine its origin. Inside the cabin, under the passenger seat, they found an old travel brochure, crumpled but readable. It bore the Visit Atchafalaya Basin logo and a short list of private tours. One of them offered tours from a guide named Eldridge Harrison. There was no contact information, just a name and an old slogan: Explore the Unseen Louisiana. Next to him was a folded piece of paper, a receipt from the Cypress Rest Motel, dated October 14, 2016, the day before he disappeared. On the back of the receipt, someone had written down a few numbers with a ballpoint pen. The record reads as follows: 973, then unclear, maybe 5 or 6. Experts confirmed that the handwriting was similar to Antoine's, which was preserved in his company's documents. These findings were the first traces pointing to the Duval's route on the day before the trip. The Cypress Rest Motel was 50 miles from where the car was later found. Detectives contacted the owner of the establishment. He, an elderly man, recalled only that tourists often stayed there in those years, but did not remember anyone in particular. The guest magazines had long since been thrown away during the renovation. After that, attention was focused on the name from the brochure. It turned out that a private guide named Eldridge Harrison had indeed once worked in the area. Old fishermen and hunters remembered him as a hermit with a boat and a dog. According to one of the residents, Harrison often led tours for tourists through the swamps, knew every canal, and could take them through places where even the locals did not risk going. But the last mention of him dated back to about 2015. Then he suddenly disappeared. Some said he moved to Texas. Others said he drowned in a flood. No official records of his later life could be found. While the team was doing these checks, the lab provided a report on the paint from the bumper. Its structure was consistent with an industrial coating used on Ford vehicles of the late 90s. These pickup trucks often belonged to fishermen and local farm workers. The report did not contain direct conclusions, but experts hinted that contact with such a vehicle could have occurred just before the car was submerged in water. Detective Luc Thibault, who was officially involved as a consultant, reviewed all the materials. In his notes, he wrote, "The absence of license plates, the key in the ignition, the neutral gear, and the locked doors all point to human intervention, if not by accident, then by intent." When journalists learned about the found documents, they quickly revived the old case in the press. Local publications wrote, "After 7 years of silence, Atchafalaya gave a sign again. The mysterious guide and the missing car are a new twist in the Duval case." But the police did not make any official statements. In the archives, they found only one old mention of Harrison in a local newspaper from 2013. They wrote about a private guide who shows tourists the real Louisiana and participates in a campaign to clean the canals from poaching traps. After that, his name was never mentioned again. The investigation moved slowly, as if through the same thick water from which the car was pulled. Each new detail dissolved into doubt. The motel no longer existed in its original form. The guide had disappeared without a trace, and the paint on the bumper could have belonged to hundreds of cars. But something about the combination of these facts was unnerving. Detective T. Bolt, looking at the photos of the body, noticed a small scratch on the rear fender that had not been seen before. It ran almost parallel to the blue paint stripe. It looked like contact from a hard object, perhaps a metal hook or the side of a boat. And this observation was the first hint that the story could be related to water rather than the road. After the official confirmation of the car's ownership and the results of the examinations, the Duvall's case received a new status: suspected criminal interference. Now the police had not just a disappearance, but also facts that indicated a deliberate cover-up. There were many questions to be answered: why the car was in the water without a boat, who was around on the day of their disappearance, and what role was played by the same guide whose name remained only on an old advertising brochure. After 7 years of silence, the case finally got off the ground, but the answers that were beginning to emerge were no less disturbing than Atchafalaya's silence itself. The search for a man named Eldridge Harrison began with a name found on an old tourist brochure. For several weeks, he could not be found either at his old addresses or through registries. According to locals, he had allegedly disappeared from the area several years ago. But former detective Luke T. Bolt thought otherwise. He knew that people rarely actually disappear in the swamps. They just stop showing up. Through his long-standing connections among fishermen, Thibault learned that a man by that name lived near the town of Pierre Partout. His description matched: a recluse in his 60s who used to take tourists on boats and now repaired old engines and sold spare parts from his shed. The house was located in a remote area near a narrow road where the asphalt ended and the marsh grass began. When the detectives arrived, there was fog over the water, and the air smelled like burnt gasoline. The neighbors, a couple of old fishermen, told them that Harrison lived alone, had a dog, and hardly spoke to anyone. One of them said, "He's not dangerous, he just doesn't want anyone to touch his past." During the first conversation, Eldridge Harrison denied having anything to do with the Duvalls. According to the investigator, he was calm but tense, answering briefly and avoiding details. When he was shown a copy of an old tourist guide logbook with his name and license number issued a year before the couple's disappearance, he remained silent for a long time. Then he admitted that yes, he had once led boat tours for tourists from New Orleans. Indeed, on the eve of the Saturday in October when Antoine and Isabelle Duval disappeared, he had given them a private tour of the swamps. According to him, the weather was hot and the water was high after recent rains. He recalled that the couple seemed happy. Antoine took a lot of photos, and Isabelle asked enthusiastically about birds and plants. Harrison assured him that nothing suspicious had happened, except for one episode that he did not want to recall for a long time. During the tour, they came across two men setting metal traps along a narrow stream. According to Harrison, they were hunters, probably poachers, who were trapping muskrats. He immediately recognized the typical wire nooses, which are illegal. When Antoine saw this, he became indignant and demanded that they remove the traps. He spoke loudly, Harrison recalled, and seemed genuinely angry. He said he would report it to the Wildlife Service. The hunters did not take it well. One of them, a tall, burly man, stepped forward and said something harsh. Harrison did not relay the exact words, but it is clear from his testimony that the argument escalated into an open confrontation. Then the guide intervened, asking the Duvalls to get in the boat and leave. They left, and the hunters stayed on the shore, watching them. Their faces were angry, especially the younger one," he said. Harrison went on to say that he returned the tourists to the pier about an hour before sunset. Antoine thanked him and promised that he would write a positive review of the tour. Those were his last words that Harrison remembered. When asked why he didn't go to the police after learning of their disappearance, the man explained that he was afraid at first. In those years, there were indeed several conflicts with poachers in the area. Those who tried to intervene received anonymous threats or found their boats destroyed. Harrison said, "Everyone here knows that the swamp has its own laws. It's better to be silent than to disappear yourself." Despite his reluctance to say more, detectives got a key detail from him. He described the two hunters as father and son. The older one was a stout man with gray hair. The younger one was thin, in his 20s. Both were wearing work clothes, stained with grease, and drove an old blue pickup truck that Harrison remembered because of the chipped paint and the absence of a front license plate. It was this detail, the blue pickup truck, that immediately caught Thibault's eye. The traces of blue paint on the bumper of the Duval's car could have been the result of contact with this vehicle. After the interrogation, the detectives went to the nearest settlements, checking information about local hunters. Witnesses confirmed that there was indeed a group of poachers in the area who set traps for fur-bearing animals. Conflicts with them occurred more than once. In 2015, unknown persons set fire to the boat workshop of a farmer who had reported illegal hunting to the police. After that, most residents stopped interfering. Harrison's testimony forced us to revisit old reports again. The Fish and Game Department documents did indeed mention an incident in the same area, a trap check where two unidentified individuals fled in a blue pickup truck. The date coincided with the period when the Duvalis disappeared. Harrison himself remained an unreliable witness. According to Thibault, he acted as if he was trying to hide not so much the truth as his own fear. His hands were shaking as he signed the report. After the conversation, he said only one phrase that everyone remembered. "There are no secrets in the swamp, only things that are better not to be found." Now the detectives had a concrete clue. They knew that somewhere in the swamps of Louisiana, there were people who did not tolerate outsiders, and that the Duval couple may have accidentally crossed the line where the law no longer applied. After years of silence, a direction appeared, a blue pickup truck, a father and son whose names no one has yet spoken aloud. The marshes were silent again, but Thibault realized that behind this silence was someone's shadow, which had not yet left the water. The investigation into the Duval case reached a new level when the detectives received the results of an inspection by the Fish and Game Department. Based on Eldridge Harrison's description and coincidences with archival violations, they came across the Beaudreau family, old acquaintances of the local police. Jacob Beaudreau, a man of 55, lived on a remote farm off the road to Port Bar. His son, Caleb, 26, lived with him and worked with his father during the fishing season. In police reports from previous years, their names were repeatedly mentioned in cases of poaching, illegal trapping, and armed clashes with inspectors. During the inspection of their property, detectives noticed an old blue Ford pickup truck with fresh paint stains on the bumper. The color and type of car matched Harrison's description. Welding marks and painted-over scratches indicated that it had been recently repaired. The car was photographed and paint samples were taken. Jacob Beaudreau took the police's appearance calmly. According to witnesses, he behaved coldly, even when challenged. When the detectives explained the reason for the visit, he shrugged his shoulders and said that he had never heard of a couple from New Orleans. When asked about a possible conflict with tourists 7 years ago, he replied that, in the swamps, everyone quarrels and then forgets. He explained the damage to the pickup truck simply as off-road driving and collisions with snags. During the official interrogation at the district administration, he remained adamant. The report states, Beaudreau, Jacob, refused to answer questions without an attorney present. After consulting with an attorney, he denies any connection with the Duval family or the events of the 16th century. His son Caleb behaved differently. When the police brought him in for questioning, he looked confused and distant. According to Detective Luke Thibault, the boy rubbed his hands nervously and did not make eye contact. During the first questioning, he confused the dates, saying that nothing special happened that year. When he was shown the Duvals' photographs, he looked away and said he was not sure who he was seeing. His words did not convince anyone. According to the protocol, he tried to stick to his father's line. "I don't know, I didn't see, I didn't hear." But the longer the interrogation went on, the more noticeable his internal tension became. Thibault noticed it right away. After several hours of fruitless conversation, the detectives separated the suspects. Thibault kept Caleb, realizing that the younger Baudreau would not last long. He knew how fear worked, especially when confronted with guilt. On the table in front of the boy were printouts from the case, photos of the Duval, copies of old newspapers, a picture of the car found in the swamp. According to one of the operatives present, Thibault did not put pressure on him. He just talked about his family, about the loss, about how his sister Isabel is still looking for answers every year. He was painting the human face of the case in front of him, the officer said later, not the accusation, but the sadness. Caleb tried not to listen. He sat with his hands clasped together and his head down. But when Thibault mentioned Harrison's words about the conflict with the hunters, his shoulders shook. The report reads, "The suspect showed a visible reaction to the mention of the incident with the poachers, but declined to comment." After an hour's break, Thibault returned to him. According to the detective, he then told Caleb that he understood that 7 years ago he was too young to make decisions for himself. "I didn't see him as a criminal. I saw him as a guy who made a mistake and was living with it," Thibault later explained to reporters. At that moment, something changed. Caleb was silent for a long time, then whispered a few words that would later be quoted in reports and TV news. "I didn't want anyone to die. We just wanted to scare them into silence. But it all went wrong." After that, he refused to speak further without a lawyer. But this confession was enough. Investigators received a legal basis for the arrest. Jacob Baudreau was detained at home. Witnesses saw him walk out onto the porch without resisting, but with a cold look on his face. "You can't prove anything," he told the officers before getting into the car. His son was taken out of the interrogation room that evening. Both were taken to a detention center in Baton Rouge. From Thibault's report, preliminary statements by the younger Baudreau indicate direct contact between the suspect's family and the Duval family on the day of their disappearance. The motive is a conflict based on poaching. The course of events needs to be clarified. This was the first real breakthrough for the detectives in many years. They now had specific individuals, a vehicle, a possible motive, and a partial confession. But according to Thibault, in this case, every answer opened up a new question. When he left the station that evening, it was raining over the marshes, the same as the day the Duval disappeared. And in the sound of it, mixed with the echo of old confessions, there was a feeling that reckoning was finally coming. After a few days in the detention center, Caleb Baudreau broke down. According to the officer on duty, he hardly slept and spent hours in the corner of his cell, staring at the wall. He refused to eat and did not respond to conversations. Only when Detective Luke Thibault personally asked for permission to have another conversation with him did Caleb agree. The interrogation began in a small windowless room. The protocol states, "The suspect is in a state of exhaustion, responds quietly but coherently, and acknowledges his willingness to cooperate." That very day, he told everything he had been hiding for 7 years. Caleb admitted that on that October day, when he and his father met the Duval family, the conflict really happened. According to him, Antoine was outraged when he saw the metal traps and began to argue with Jacob. "He was shouting that he was going to notify the authorities," Caleb said, "and my father was just silent, but I could see that something clicked in him." As the guide, Eldridge Harrison, drove the tourists away, Jacob said only, "If they open their mouths, it's over." The next morning, the Boudreaux set out to find the Duval camp. According to Caleb, they followed the canal by boat, guided by the smoke from the fire. When they approached, Antoine was preparing the gear and Isabel was standing by the water. At first, the father said he just wanted to talk, but the conversation quickly turned into an argument. Caleb claims that he tried to calm them both down, but Jacob grabbed a heavy boat hook and hit Antoine in the head. He fell into the water and did not come up. Isabel screamed and rushed to the shore, but Jacob pushed her away. According to the son, everything happened in seconds. "It was quiet after that," he said. "Only the water was moving." When they were sure that neither was breathing, Jacob ordered the bodies to be tied to 2 small anchors that were in the boat. Caleb helped silently, not realizing what he was doing. Then they took the bodies to a deeper channel where the water was dark and almost standing still, and dumped them. After that, Jacob said that they had to make sure no one looks. According to Caleb, they took the Duval's boat and all their belongings. Fishing gear, a first aid kit, and personal items were thrown away on the road. Jacob started the couple's car, which was parked at the edge of the forest. He got behind the wheel, and his son walked beside him, holding the rope. The car was slowly driven downhill and pushed into the water. "He wanted it to look like an accident," Caleb explained, "so everyone would think they drowned themselves." Investigators recorded every detail. The confession matched the results of the technical examination. The engine was turned off, the doors were locked, and the key was left in the ignition. After that, the detectives received a warrant to search for the body in the specified location. The search lasted several days. The Atchafalaya swamps were changing every hour. The water was rising, the silt was settling, the smell of rot was mixing with the gasoline of the engines. Teams of divers worked in difficult conditions, guided by old maps of the canals that Harrison had shown them. The report states, "The search area is the northern branch of the basin, with an estimated water depth of over 20 feet and a silt layer of up to 3 feet on the bottom." On the 4th day, they came across pieces of fabric tangled in the reeds. Next to it was a metal chain overgrown with shells and a small boat anchor. All of this was brought to the surface. In the metal ring of the anchor, there were fibers of the rope used to tie it. A little further down, the divers found bone remains. Some of them were immediately sent for examination. A week later, experts confirmed that the remains belonged to Antoine and Isabel Duval. The genetic analysis matched the samples provided by Isabel's sister, Madeleine Renaud. She came to the morgue in person and saw the silver medallion she had once given to her sister. It was this item that allowed the official identification of the woman. When the results became known, Jacob Boudreaux was transferred to a high-security detention center. He refused to testify and called his son's confession fiction. His lawyer said that his client was not involved, and his son broke under pressure. However, the totality of the evidence, traces of paint, car forensics, and the remains found left no doubt about the involvement. The court proceedings lasted several months. In the end, the prosecutor brought charges of first-degree premeditated murder against Jacob Boudreaux and complicity against his son. Caleb pleaded guilty, agreeing to a plea bargain and providing a full confession. The verdict was announced in the summer. Jacob Boudreaux was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Caleb, 25 years for complicity and concealment of the crime. At the trial, he did not look up and only repeated that he never wanted to kill. For Detective Luc Thibault, it was the end of a case that had haunted him for most of his life. In his official report, he wrote, "Atchafalaya does not let go until she decides it is time. Now she has given up what she has been holding on to." In the evening after the verdict was announced, Madeleine Renaud visited the place where her sister's car was found. According to journalists, she stood silently, holding flowers. It was quiet around, only a light wind swayed the tall stalks of grass. The water reflected the dim light, as if hiding the remnants of a history that no one wanted to remember. The Atchafalaya swamp became calm again. It had returned everything it had taken, but it had left scars on the ground, in people's memories, and in the eyes of those who had been searching for the truth for too long.